you, Christoph. That was a perfect tip. I'm going to walk everybody through how you can systematically build towards a notion of product market fit. And I'm going to share my screen. It will appear to be black. Do not be alarmed. It's just a blank screen. All right, so good morning, everybody. I am the founder and CEO of Superhuman, where we're building the fastest email experience in the world. Our customers end up getting through their inbox twice as fast as before, and many of them see inbox zero for the first time in years. Now, this is the story of how we built a product market fit engine. Now, as we all know, product market fit is the number one reason why startups succeed, and the lack of product market fit is the number one reason why startups fail. But as we were just talking about, there is this huge question of what really is product market fit. Paul Graham would say it's when you made something that people want. Sam Altman would say it's when users spontaneously tell other people to use your product. But it is perhaps Marc Andreessen who has the most vivid definition. He would say you can always feel it when product market fit is not happening. Customers aren't quite getting value. Users are not growing that fast. Word of mouth is not spreading. Press reviews are mediocre, and the sales cycle is taking too damn long. But you can always feel it when product market fit is happening. Customers are buying as fast as you can add servers. You're hiring sales and support as fast as you can. Reporters are constantly calling you about your hot new thing. Investors are staking out your house, and money is piling up in your checking account. Now, this is indeed a vivid definition, and one that I was staring at through tears in the summer of 2017. It's so subjective, so unactionable. What do you do if by this definition, you don't have product market fit? And I started to ask myself this question: can you measure product market fit? Because if you can, then maybe you can optimize it. Maybe you can systematically, even numerically, increase product market fit. And as it turns out, the answer is yes. You can measure product market fit and you can optimize it. But before I share how, let's wind the clock back by 10 years. In 2010, I started a company called Reportive. We built the first Gmail plugin to scale to millions of users. When people emailed you, we showed you what they look like, where they worked, their recent tweets, and links to their social profiles. We grew rapidly, and 2 years later, we were acquired by LinkedIn. Now, during those 4 years, I developed a very intimate view of email. I could see Gmail getting worse every single year, becoming more cluttered, using more memory, consuming more CPU, slowing down your machine, and still not working properly offline. And on top of that, people were installing plugins like ours, Reportive, but also Boomerang, Mixmax, Clearbit, you name it, they had it. And each plugin took those problems of clutter, memory use, CPU performance, and offline, and they made all of them dramatically worse. It was time for change. So we imagined an email experience that is blazingly fast, where searches are instantaneous, where every interaction is 100 milliseconds or less, an email experience where you never have to touch the mouse, where you could do everything from the keyboard and fly through your inbox, an email experience that just worked offline so you could be productive from anywhere, and an email experience that had the best Gmail plugins built in natively, and yet somehow was subtle, minimal, and visually gorgeous. And so, in the summer of 2015, we set up our office, this was our fancy sign, and we started to write code. And in the summer of 2016, we were still coding. And in the summer of 2017, we were still coding. Now, I felt this incredible, intense pressure to launch, both from the team and also from within myself. After all, Reportive had launched, scaled, and been acquired in less time. And here we were, 2 years in, and we still had not launched. But deep down inside, I knew no matter how intensely I felt the pressure, our launch would go very badly. It would not be the Marc Andreessen story. I did not believe we had product market fit. And although I knew it, I couldn't just say that to the team. They had poured their hearts and souls into the products. These are super ambitious, hyper-intelligent engineers. I needed a plan. And so, in the April of 2017, I started my search for the Holy Grail, for a way to define product market fit, for a metric to measure product market fit, and for a methodology to systematically increase product market fit. I searched high and low. I read everything I could find, spoke with all the experts, and I came across this guy, Sean Ellis. Now, Sean ran early growth at Dropbox, LogMeIn, and Eventbrite. He coined the term growth hacker. And as vivid and as compelling as Andreessen's definition of product market fit is, it is still a lagging indicator. By the time money is piling up in your checking account, guess what? You already have product market fit. Now, Sean found a leading indicator, one that is benchmarked and predictive, one that predicts success better than Net Promoter Score, and goes beyond asking, would you just refer this to someone else, or would you recommend this to someone else, through to fundamentally understanding the degree of connection to the product. Just ask your users this: how would you feel if you could no longer use the product? And measure the percent who answer very disappointed. After benchmarking hundreds of startups, Sean found that the companies that grow the most easily almost always got more than 40% very disappointed, and the companies that grew the least easily almost always had less than 40% very disappointed. If more than 40% of your users would be very disappointed without your product, then you have initial product market fit. Let's take a look at a quick example. This slide shows that same question posed to 731 Slack users, 51% of whom would be very disappointed without Slack. 51 is greater than 40, and so Slack has product market fit. Now for Slack, of course, this is self-evident. We don't need a fancy metric to show us this. But it shows just how hard it is to beat the 40% benchmark. I think it's crucial to note that there does actually exist a benchmark for this. For other metrics, especially for metrics like NPS, all of the best practice is not to benchmark too hard against industry, because it depends so hard on the fashion in which you ask the question. It depends so hard on who you ask. For some companies, 40 is great. For some companies, 60 is great when it comes to NPS. And so for that score, you want to be tracking relative. But for this score, you can actually track an absolute number that's been benchmarked across the entire industry. But it's much more objective than a feeling. This metric predicts success better than other metrics like NPS. And it's not only the best way to measure product market fit, it lets you develop your very own product market fit engine. And with this engine, you can systematically increase product market fit. It can even generate your roadmap for you in a way that is designed to methodologically increase this metric. So step one is survey. Let's take a look. Email these 4 questions to every user. How would you feel if you could no longer use the product? And give them the opportunity to answer one of 3 answers: very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, and not disappointed. Question number 2, what type of person do you think would most benefit from the product? Question number 3, what is the main benefits you receive from the product? And question number 4, how can we improve the product for you? Now, you should only send these questions when users have experienced the core value proposition of your product. At Superhuman, we wait until they've had a few weeks and then analyze the results to question number 1. These are the actual results for Superhuman in the summer of 2017. We very clearly did not have product market fit. Now that may seem sad, but now I could explain our situation to the team. And most excitingly, I had a plan to increase our product market fit score, which brings us to step 2 of the engine: segment. Now we want to understand who are the people who really love our product. And I love to use this concept of the high expectation customer, which is a concept that I found from Julie Supan. Julie led early marketing at Dropbox, Airbnb, and many other great companies. The HXC is the most discerning person in your target demographic. They will enjoy your product for its greatest benefits and help spread the word. Now, others want to be like them because they seem clever, judicious, and insightful. For example, the Dropbox HSC just wants to simplify their life. They're very trusting, they're technically savvy, they're looking to save time. And at the end of the day, the Dropbox HXC just wants to know that somebody has their back when it comes to their life's work. I'm an example of the Dropbox HSC, and I'm sure everyone here is also. The Airbnb HXC does not simply want to visit new places, they want to belong. They want to experience Paris as if they've really lived there. Now, Airbnb's early success came from focusing on these tastemakers and these influencers. So how do you create your own HXC? Well, take all the users who would be very disappointed without your product. Remember, these are the folks who love it, and analyze their answers to question number 2. Who do you think this is best for? This is a very powerful question, as happy users will almost always describe themselves, but using the words that matter most to them. You can then turn these words into a rich and detailed explanation of your own HXC. Meet Nicole, the Superhuman HXC. I'll walk you through an example of what we came up with. Now, she's a hardworking professional. She deals with many people. She might be an executive, a founder, an investor, or a manager. She works long hours, often into the weekend. She's really busy, and she wishes she had more time. Now, she does feel she's productive, and she's self-aware enough to realize she could be better. She'll occasionally investigate ways to improve, but she typically doesn't have time for doing that. Because she spends much of her day in her work inbox. On a typical day, she'll receive hundreds of emails. She might send 15 to 40, and on a busy day, she might send 80 or more. Now, this is the most important part. She considers it part of her job to be responsive, and she prides herself on being so because she knows that if she's unresponsive, she would miss opportunities, block her team, or even damage her reputation. Now, she does aim to get to inbox 0, but she gets there at most 2 or 3 times a week. Very occasionally, perhaps once a week, she'll declare email bankruptcy. And generally, she has a growth mindset. She is open-minded about new products and keeps up to date with technology. But for us, unfortunately, she might have a fixed mindset about email. And while she's open to new clients, she's skeptical that one could make her faster. So we'll have to take other mechanisms to open her mind to the power of Superhuman and what we could do to save her time. Now, once you've constructed your HXC, you want to go back to your survey results, take each response, and assign a persona to each one. And here's the magic. Take the users who most love your product, those who would be very disappointed without it, and use them to narrow the market. In this simplified example, we're going to focus on founders, managers, executives, and business development, and deliberately ignore sales, customer success, engineers, and data science. And just by segmenting, our product market fit score jumps by 10 from 22 to 32%. Now, we're not quite at 40% yet, but we've made significant progress in 2 minutes. On to step 3 of the engine, which is to analyze. We now need to understand 2 things. Why do people love our product, and what holds people back from loving our product? To understand why people love our products, we go back to our survey. We focus only on users who'd be very disappointed without it, and we analyze the results to question number 3, what is the main benefit you receive from our product? Once again, let's take a look at a few quick examples so you get a sense of what you're looking for. For Superhuman, processing email is much faster. I get through my inbox in half the time. The app is crazy fast. Superhuman is so much faster than Gmail. More efficient with my time. I work through my incoming email more quickly. I can do everything from the keyboard, speed, aesthetics, and a great set of keyboard shortcuts. Once you get all of these responses, I love to throw them up into a word cloud. You end up with something like this, and then it becomes as clear as day. People love Superhuman for its speed, focus, and keyboard shortcuts. And you should be able to articulate why people love your product in a sentence as clear and crisp as that. Now, we want to grow the size of the very disappointed crowd. First, and as painful as it is, we have to ignore the not disappointed crowd. They are so far from loving the products that they are essentially a lost cause. This is important because they will loudly ask you for all kinds of distracting things. And as counterintuitive as it may seem, do not act on their feedback. That just leaves the somewhat disappointed crowd. Maybe we can help them fall in love with our product. And as it turns out, we can. But again, and I cannot stress this enough, do not act directly on their feedback. Many of them will remain somewhat disappointed no matter what you do for them, and so their requests are just distracting. How do you decide who to listen to? Well, here's another piece of magic. We use the main benefits of the very disappointed users to segment the somewhat disappointed users. And we end up with two segments. First, the somewhat disappointed users for whom speed was not the main benefit. I strongly advise that you politely disregard their feedback because the main benefit does not resonate with them. Even if you built everything that they asked for, they are unlikely to fall in love with your product, and worst, you'll end up with a muddied product that lacks coherence and vision. Second, the somewhat disappointed users for whom speed was the main benefit. We pay very special attention to these because our main benefit does resonate, but something, and probably something small, is holding them back. Now, how do we figure out? Well, we analyze their responses to the fourth and final question: how can we improve our product for you? And here are the results for Superhuman. The main thing holding back our users in 2017 was simple. It was the lack of a mobile app. We've, of course, since built a great mobile app. But after that, it gets less obvious and more interesting. Integrations, attachments, calendaring, unified inbox, search filters, and so on into the long tail. To increase your product's market fit score, all you have to do is build these things. That would convert users who are only somewhat disappointed without your product into fanatics who love your product. And it does so in a way without muddying the vision or the coherence of your product. What makes it great, in our case, speed, shortcuts, aesthetics, focus, and flow, continue to be the things that make it great. Now, this brings us on to step 4 of the product's market fit engine to implement. We now understand why users love our product, and we understand what holds users back. To increase our product's market fit score, we should therefore simply spend half our time doubling down on what users love, in our case, more speed, shortcuts, efficiency, and aesthetics, and just as importantly, half our time systematically addressing what holds users back. Now, if we only double down on what users love, as vision-driven teams are wont to do, we would not increase our product's market fit score. If we only address objections, as data-driven teams are wont to do, our competitor would eventually overtake us. This is your new roadmap. It automatically writes itself. And that brings us to the 5th and final stage of the product's market fit engine, which is to track. Now, this framework will work, but there are no silver bullets. As you double down on what users love and as you address what holds users back, you should constantly survey new users. I recommend tracking this score every week, month, and quarter. It's important to note, do not survey any user more than once. That adds systematic bias to the survey, and it renders the 40% benchmark just not relevant. The number doesn't make any sense if you're constantly resurveying users. So we survey users continuously, and we aggregate those numbers on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. In the summer of 2017, our product's market fit score was 33%. After a quarter, it was 47%. Next quarter, it was 56%, and the quarter after that, 58%. Reaching actually the theoretical maximum for what our product's market fit score could be, converting all of those somewhat disappointed users for whom the main benefit resonated to being very disappointed without Superhuman. And so we reached the point where 58% of our users would be very disappointed without our product. The product's market fit engine really does work because it gives you a way to define product's market fit, a metric to measure product's market fit, and a methodology to increase product's market fit systematically over time. And as I've shown you, it can even automatically write your roadmap for you. So I really hope that you consider using this at your company. And if you do, please let me know. I would love to help you in any way that I can. And now there's also a really amazing startup working on this. They've taken the process to run the product market fit engine, and they've turned it into a tool that you can use. It's called viable.fit. I'm also working with them to make this process as smooth and easy as possible. If you'd like an introduction to them, please just let me know. But I'm also happy to help directly. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm emailable, of course, at rahul@superhuman.com. You can find me on Twitter at Rahul Vohra. My DMs are open. Feel free to DM me. And because I know a bunch of folks did ping me before the session about access to Superhuman, we are still in waitlist mode. There's over 320,000 people on the waitlist. But what I do say is that the fastest way to get onto Superhuman is via referral. And what I'll do here for all of the SaaStock community is I'll be happy to refer anyone who wants access. So if you think you're well qualified, if you sound like Nicole, if for you email is work and work is email, and you want the fastest experience, and you use Gmail or G Suite, and you have an iPhone, we don't quite yet have an Android app, then feel free to ping me, and I will be your referrer. I will jump you right to the front of the line, and I'd love to get you onto Superhuman as fast as we can, so we can help you move as fast as possible. So feel free to ping me either about product market fit or about Superhuman. I'd love to help in any way that I can.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rahul. I'm glad that you said that you would refer everybody here, because I was just about to vouch for everyone here that they are qualified and that they should be at the top of the list. Really, really amazing talk. Thanks so much for sharing that. And the folks at viable.fit, either they're clearly kind of watching this, are very good at marketing, because they've been on social media mentioning the product as well. So very keen to look at that. Conscious of time, have you got time for a couple of questions that we?
Yeah, I can hang out.
Excellent. So
it's before my working day here, so you got me for a while.
Good stuff. From Damien Bananis here, great talk. Thank you, Rahul. Question: how early should you start this process? Is there a value at the very early stages with a survey like this, or would you recommend a different way to discover key segments and needs?
Great question. Okay, so how early would you start this process? I wouldn't beat yourself up by doing it too early. If you don't think that you have product market fit, you probably don't. Now, you might be surprised. So this is only directional advice. But you, as the product founder, should be able to feel something special about your products before you start going out there and systematically surveying users. For us, it took us about 2 years to get to the point where we built something where I was like, well, okay, I think this is pretty good. There's definitely something special here, but I don't think we have product market fit. I think we're maybe halfway there. That's the point. That sense when you're halfway there is the point where you want to start systematically surveying users. And the important thing is to build a repeatable, scalable process. To do this, we now survey everyone who comes on board onto Superhuman. In fact, we've been doing that for many years because we built a systematic process. Now, we did it with sticks and glue and Typeform and Airtable and Zapier and just like a whole bunch of stuff. Viable.fit's intending to make that a lot easier. A very related question that people always ask me, so I'll just answer it in case anyone's wondering, is when do you start to get useful data? You start to get useful data with as few as 40 responses. That's actually when it becomes directionally accurate, and it's surprisingly few. You don't need that many.
Excellent. I think you also answered the next question I was going to ask about the tech stack. So you mentioned Typeform and Airtable and gluing all this together, but now viable.fit, maybe the out of the box sort of solution for this, right? So yeah, I guess you kind of answered that one. I'll jump to the next one from Robert Sieg, I think pronounced. Are there any adjustments required to accomplish the PMF engine methodology for two-sided SaaS?
Two-sided SaaS. So Robert, I just want to get clarification. Do you mean SaaS when the user is different to the buyer, like where there are multiple stakeholders?
Let's see, give Robert a second to type that. Maybe we can come back to that in a second. Allow Robert to answer that. How did the professional, from Cami Thurman, how did the professional title and therefore use expectations affect your results?
How did the professional title and therefore use expectations? Okay, I think, Cami, if I'm understanding correctly, we're asking how did the person's role, the potential role of the person using Superhuman affect the results? Yeah, great question. And that's actually the entire purpose of the product market fit engine is to help you segment towards a set of roles that actually make sense for your product. Let's take our space. Let's take email. One of the biggest problems with email as a space is basically every email company that's come prior, with the exception of vertically specific email companies like Front and Mixmax and so on, they just kind of launch. And they launch for everyone, and they don't seem to care who they launch for. Now, as a result, they become a one-size-fits-all t-shirt. Now, you might want a large, you might need a small. It doesn't matter. Like, you're given this email client that is just sort of designed for everybody. But the best software isn't like that. The best software is actually designed for specific personas, for specific types of people. When people think about product market fits, they forget that there's also half of that equation that's market. You can change your market. You don't have to keep on changing your product. And so how does it affect the results? Absolutely, hugely. And the whole point of the first 2 steps of the product market fit engine is to explore different segments where your product market fit score might be surprisingly higher than you would expect.
Robert did answer. He said yes, exactly, to your point around two-sided SaaS.
Yeah, great question. So if you're in a situation where your end users are different to your buyers, you want both sets of users to be deliriously happy, of course. Now, we live in a world where most enterprise SaaS software is, certainly the successful stuff, is being adopted bottoms up. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. It basically greases the wheels on distribution. It makes acquisition a lot easier. But at the end of the day, someone other than the user is probably paying for the software. So I would recommend running 2 parallel sets of surveys. Make sure your end users, the people who are clicking and typing away, are deliriously happy. And when you can, I know it will take longer to get to this point, make sure that your buyers, it might be the CIO or their managers or your executive sponsor, whoever it is, are also happy. And if some people are in this, Superhuman isn't in this case, but if you end up in like a really complex sale, it's not just your end users, it's not just the buyers, but you have other stakeholders all the way across the organization. Maybe there's legal, maybe there's compliance, maybe there's finance, maybe there's somebody else, and they end up important stakeholders to renewing the contracts to buy your thing. Then why not survey them as well? Survey the legal people, survey the buyers, survey the users, run parallel sets of surveys. Don't make the mistake, though, of conflating all of these into one survey, because that will get muddled.
Here's a good question from Gemma Guilera. Actually, one that we asked internally at SaaStock this week as we're sending out a survey around, as we're doing customer development on a new product. How do you ensure people actually answer your questionnaires? I keep on surveying, but have a low answer rate as people are overwhelmed with so many surveys going around in their lives. What is the incentive? What is there? Does there have to be one?
Yeah, great question. We are fortunate to not have that low of a survey rate. We charge for our products, and I think that makes a tremendous difference. A question I'll throw back to Gemma is, are you charging for your product? If not, I would expect a significantly low response rate. So whilst you're giving me the answer to that, just some things to test are, try sending it out a different way. There's no rule that says it has to go out via email and it has to be a typeform survey. You could put this in an intercom widget. You could put this in a drift widget. You could build it into your product. You could use Twilio and automations to text this question to your users if you have that kind of relationship with them. I'm like brainstorming here. You could Twitter DM it to them if you have that kind of relationship. You could send it over other social media channels. You could put it in the product after a specific moment. I would just start experimenting with different places to put it out there. Be aware, though, that each one of these is going to introduce some form of systematic bias. It might make the 40% number slightly less relevant. I wouldn't actually worry too much about that because the goal is always to increase the number. And yeah, thumbs up. Okay, good.
Good stuff. Okay, who else? I know Robert is further commenting on his question. I saw one from AB there, but I have to kind of like scroll up. I think he was asking about the story of Superhuman. Like, how did you get the idea for that? And yeah, so I think that's what he wanted to know.
Wonderful. Yeah, sure. So this was essentially the story that I talked to earlier, where and I think this is true for most founders. We get our inspiration from the frustration that we felt, especially from the last roll or two that we've had. And it came from running Reportive. It came from seeing, Gmail, this thing that was once incredible, just become decrepit over time. And I was part of the problem, right? I popularized this idea that you can just add things to Gmail, not without using any API mind, just literally glomming it onto the page, and somehow that would be fine. Well, guess what? It turns out not to be fine. It turns out to ruin Gmail and to like make your overall browsing and Chrome experience not particularly pleasant. And so in a sense, it was actually also part guilt. I wanted to repair the damage that we and many other companies since had done to the ecosystem. And then I validated it. Like, it's really important to validate your ideas. So I had this conception that super fast email was going to be a thing that people who do email for a living really need, and no one was building it. In the first year of the company, I did validate that. We built a simple landing page. It wasn't particularly pretty. It was a Squarespace landing page with some stock photography. But the most important thing is that it had a sign-up box where people could come and sign up for Superhuman, even though I knew it was many years out. Now, whenever anyone signed up, they would receive an email from me. It was an automated email from me, but some of those people would reply. And when they replied, I would engage every single one. And my trick for this was keeping the conversation going as long as possible. And so every time that they would reply, I would reply, and then we would just go back and forth. So for example, someone might say, by the way, the initial email had 2 questions. What do you use for your email? And what do you hate about it? What are your pet peeves? And someone would reply and they might say, hey, I use Gmail and my pet peeve is that it's really slow and it doesn't work properly offline. And by the way, it seems to destroy my battery. And they might also say that they use Boomerang. And then I would say, oh, that's super interesting. What, by the way, I'm curious, are your favorite features in Boomerang? And they would say, well, I use reminders and scheduled send, and I like their grammar thingy. And I would say, well, okay, if you would stack rank those in order of like must-have, what would you say is the must-have? And they would say probably, well, reminders I use every single day. Honestly, I could live without send later and the other stuff. And then I would say, at this point, we're like 4 or 5 emails in, I would say, cool, well, I'm actually building that feature right now. What is your most common reminder time? And they would say, well, I typically use 2 or 3 days, 1 day if it's an internal employee, and I don't really use any of the rest. And I'm like, awesome, you're directly impacting the roadmap of our product here. And for some people, this would go on 10, 15, 20, 25 emails, and people really felt like they were helping to build the product. And the most important thing is that in that first year of Superhuman, I had 1,000 conversations like this. That's 3 conversations a day. So it's taking this idea of validating your concept, which in this case was super fast email, and doing it at scale, doing it in a highly compressed time frame, doing it inside of that first year, and then also turning it into the opportunity to do customer development. That's how you go from, I have this idea, to, is it actually something that people want?
Excellent. I'm going to ask one more question as it's been asked before we wrap up. And so we've got Renat Zubairov. Rahul, thanks for the great presentation. Do you think by relentlessly optimizing for a particular customer profile will, over the long term, limit the addressable size of the market?
No, I don't believe that. I think this is it's a common thing for people to think. Now, Paul Graham has said this best in his essay, Startup Equals Growth. He observes that the landscape of good startup ideas is not spiky. In other words, great ideas are adjacent to even better ideas, which are adjacent to even better ideas. And by focusing on a niche, all you're really doing is saying, we're just going to make this company successful in the way that seems obvious to us now, and we're going to iterate from there. It's very, very rare that you end up sort of stuck on one niche. And there are so many examples of this, whether it's Uber going from black car to UberX, whether it's Airbnb going from couch surfing to now taking on hotels, whether it's actually my favorite example is AngelList. For those who follow the trajectory of AngelList, started off as just an email newsletter. There wasn't even any software behind it. I know this because Rapportive was one of the first angel invested companies from the email newsletter back in 2010. And then it went to a thing that does syndicates, and then it went to a thing that does back office for venture capital firms, and now it's essentially an index fund for Silicon Valley. And I think you could have said, well, for AngelList, let's take that example again, would focusing just on a newsletter for angels who don't have a way to find good companies end up being a small market? And the answer is no, because the landscape of good ideas is not spiky.
Awesome. We'll wrap up there. I just want to mention sort of anecdotally, I was speaking with Sean Ellis, and I wanted to get him on this SaaStock Sessions. He couldn't make it because of a retreat, unfortunately, but it would have been interesting to have Christoph, who was inspired by your road to PMF, and then you, and then with like Sean Ellis, who sort of inspired, and how you get to PMF. It didn't happen, but it would have been interesting, and I wouldn't have known the connection. But on another note, obviously you'll be speaking at SaaStock EMEA online in October, which is our replacement for obviously our cancelled SaaStock 2020 event, which usually takes place in Dublin. So very much looking forward to that. Do you know what you'll be speaking about for that event? I know it's some way out. I think the earlier of the year we spoke about sort of game design. You still thinking about that?
Yeah, game design is very top of mind for me. It's one of the things that I notice in Silicon Valley, especially as an investor. So I also run a $7 million angel investment fund. So I work with a lot of founders who've invested in 25 companies or more at this point. We're really, really good at figuring out what users want and need. But as an industry, we're not that great yet at building for what users feel, at designing for emotion. And I used to work as a game designer back in the UK, actually, at Jagex up in Cambridge. I worked on RuneScape, which at the time was the world's largest online role-playing game. And we were just obsessed with making our users feel as incredible, as joyful, as delightful as we could make them feel. And I don't see enough of that happening in Silicon Valley, in SaaS more generally, with any founder that I've worked with. And so that's a lot of what I spend my time talking about, is how can we make software like it's a game. At Superhuman, we've turned this into almost a curriculum. We identified 5 key factors that you can use, many principles across those. And that's what I'll be talking about at SaaStock Online later on this year. Amazing, amazing. Really looking forward to that. Well, thank you, Rahul Vohra, so much for spending some additional time with the community and answering those questions, talking about your path to product market fit. So really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Great, and thank you for the opportunity. See you all later this year. Excellent. Thank you so much. Please show your appreciation to Rahul on the stage chat.